There are only a handful of co-op TurboGrafx-16 games. We're going to talk about all of them. Despite the low amount, the games we are covering are all pretty good to great, with lots of variety.
I'm sure you'll mention in the comments if there were any we missed, but before you do that, we are only covering the North American TurboGrafx-16 HuCard releases, so no PC Engine imports or CD games. Those will be for a later video.
Every co-op TurboGrafx-16 game ranked from worst to best. First, we debated whether or not to even cover sports games, but for the sake of being complete, we'll just briefly mention them. As you can imagine, none of them are exactly highlights for the console.
Davis Cup is an incredibly generic and average tennis game. It's always split screen for some reason, even when both players are on the same team.
15-40.
Hit the Ice is a pretty decent hockey game. I liked the big sprites and art style. It's just kind of weird that there's no music though. Sonic Spike looks like it could be fun. The characters and design look pretty nice, but it's just not fun at all. It's not fun to play. It's clunky and unresponsive. Just stick with Super Spike V-Ball on NES. That game is actually great.
TV sports series. There's a basketball game, a football game, and a hockey game. These games are all incredibly mediocre with bad sound effects and uninspired gameplay. The only thing they all have going for them is that they all have the ability to play them 5-player co-op.
Rhino, first down.
World Court Tennis. I actually really enjoyed this game. I like the variety in characters and art design. The sound effects are fun, the controls and gameplay are actually pretty good. And as far as sports games go, on the TurboGrafx, this is probably the best one to play with a friend.
Falcon is an interesting one. The only way to play the game cooperatively is to have 2 portable Turbo Express consoles and 2 copies of the game, and to system link them. I only own 1 Turbo Express, so I was not able to test this one out, but I wanted to mention it. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the games now.
Number 9. Aeroblasters. Aeroblasters is a horizontal shoot-'em-up where 2 players can each control a blaster fighter. There are various weapon upgrades you can get that really help make things more interesting. Unfortunately, we ended up dying so much that we rarely got a chance to get used to these upgrades. We put this game at the bottom of our list, not because it's bad or anything, it's just very average.
The music is not memorable, the art style is pretty boring, and the gameplay doesn't add anything new to the genre. However, design-wise, I did find some of the boss fights to be pretty cool. The TurboGrafx is known for its excellent shooter library. Aeroblasters just doesn't hold up when it's next to Blazing Lasers or Soldier Blade. At least you could play it 2 players though. Number 8. Double Dungeons. Double Dungeons is a first-person dungeon crawler with turn-based battles. When playing co-op, you and your friend start on different ends of the map. It's your goal to both work your way towards the exit door. The game is played in split screen. You are able to gain experience and level up, as well as use gold that is earned in battles to purchase new weapons and armor. If you die, you must start at the beginning of the dungeon. You keep your items and experience, but your gold will be lost.
This game is so close to being good, but has a couple of really annoying flaws that keep it from being enjoyable. The biggest issue is that everything looks exactly the same. With no map, you are forced to travel through the dungeons based solely on memorizing left and right turns. If a map was at least provided, the lack of diversity in visuals could be ignored. I think the cooperative gameplay could greatly be improved if you started together at the same location. Most of the game is spent apart, roaming the halls completely alone. It's rare that you actually get the chance to be with your partner. That being said, I haven't played any other console co-op game like this. I appreciate the effort, even if it is deeply flawed. Number 7, Ordyne.
Ordyne is another horizontal shoot-'em up. What puts it above Aeroblasters is its originality. I love the colorful sprites, the character designs. Well, alright, well, that one might be a little racist. The boss fights are all unique and require a little more patience as you search for their weak spots.
There's even a shop that allows you to upgrade weapons or shields. I do wish that the upgrades would at least last until you died. They seem to go pretty quick and are often gone within a second. This definitely prevented us from wanting to go into other shops later in the game. It's just not worth the time or effort to even gather up the funds for purchases. We still had a good time with this one.
Number 6, Bonk 3. Bonk 3 is a 2D platformer where you play as a bald caveman that uses his head to attack enemies. This is the only game in the series that supports 2 players. At first, we found the game to be incredibly frustrating, trying to keep up with each other during tricky platforming sections, then having to go back to get your partner over and over created a less than ideal experience. Then we finally discovered that by pressing the select button, you were able to teleport to your partner. This fixed every problem we had in co-op mode. Now if one of you is struggling to keep up, you can simply teleport and not have to worry about keeping perfect sync in the more difficult precision-based jumping parts.
The attacks took a little while to get used to. When you're accustomed to playing Mario and Sonic, you want to just be able to jump on your enemies without thinking. I had to break that muscle memory and constantly remind myself that you need to push the attack button after jumping to do the downward headbutt. This isn't a negative, it's actually a nice change of pace. I just had to take a minute to make the mental adjustment. There's also a number of upgrades you can get, although I just never found them to be that useful or interesting. My favorite feature was tapping the attack button during a jump to slowly glide back down to the ground. None of the Bonk games are perfect, but if you're looking for a slightly different take on the old school 2D platformer, it's definitely worth at least trying. Number 5, Parasol Stars, the story of Bubble Bobble 3.
Parasol Stars is one of the sequels to Bubble Bobble. Well, it's the direct sequel to Rainbow Island, which is a sequel to Bubble Bobble, but there is also a Bubble Bobble sequel just called Bubble Bobble Part 2 on NES. Yeah, it's all very confusing. All you need to know is Parasol Stars on TurboGrafx is really good. You play as the human forms of Bub and Bob. Get it? It originally came out in arcade and was ported to Amiga, Atari ST, Game Boy, NES, and TurboGrafx. I can't speak for the home computer ports, but as far as the consoles go, the TurboGrafx version obviously blows the NES port out of the water. You know, it has the visual advantage due to more powerful hardware, but it also offers 2 players, just like the original arcade version. Up until recently, I didn't have any experience with the Bubble Bobble sequels and spin-offs. I did, however, play the original NES port with my little brother just a ton. I remember when we were kids, we'd spend hours over at my cousin's house just playing Bubble Bobble. Those were the good old days.
Parasol Stars is kind of more of the same. It's a single-screen platformer that involves eliminating all the enemies and collecting fruit and snacks and whatnot. The main difference, instead of bubbles, is that you use umbrellas. It reminds me of the umbrella upgrade you can get in Kirby game. You can attack and spin enemies on top of you, as well as use the umbrella to slowly float down. I love the color sprites in this game, and the boss fights were all huge and varied. If you're looking for co-op games on TurboGrafx-16, I highly recommend this one.
Number 4. Dungeon Explorer. Dungeon Explorer is a top-down dungeon crawler with some RPG elements, kind of like Gauntlet meets Zelda or something. You can choose your class at the beginning of the game. You have a fighter, thief, warlock, witch, bishop, elf, bard, or gnome. They each play more or less the same, but with different strengths and weaknesses. There is a password system that allows you to pick up where you left off, and luckily it's a short password, unlike other games of the era with 50 plus characters and multiple zeros and O's that are just impossible to distinguish from one another. You should be able to just put in the code and get back to the game without having to attempt it over and over. That's a plus, for sure, right?
The main draw to Dungeon Explorer is the fact that it can be played with up to 5 players. I think the most I've ever managed to attempt was 4, but I would love to revisit it and experience the game the way it was intended. As you can see, we only captured the footage with 2 players, but even then, it's still a very enjoyable time. However, the game is a little unbalanced. Right off the bat, you're thrown into the world without any guidance. You can die pretty quickly. From what I can tell, once a party member dies, they can't be revived unless you continue with the password. But that's not unusual for a game from this era. Unlike most RPGs, you don't gain levels through fighting more enemies, but only through collecting the crystals that bosses drop. The exploration and text from all of the townspeople set it apart from standard dungeon crawlers. If you can find 4 friends to play with, go explore some dungeons with them on your TG16. Number 3. Chu Man Fu.
Chu Man Fu is a simple game. You and a partner kick the colorful balls into the positions that match with the color of each ball. The balls are also used as your only defense against the enemies. You can push or pull the ball in any direction, as well as around corners. The puzzles start out very easy, but quickly become more challenging. This is the game I was most surprised by. Based on the screenshots and gameplay I saw, I really didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. I remember when I first got my PC Engine, this was the game that I had the most fun with. And it's been about 8 years, it's still one of my go-to co-op games for a quick pick up and play.
The levels are all short, and with unlimited continues, it's easy to spend a few hours with this game. It gets really addictive. When we were capturing footage, I just kept saying, just one more level. It might not have been the deepest gameplay on the list, and it might not even be the best game, but it is the one we had the most fun with.
Number 2. Shockman. Shockman is a 2D action platformer. It's the second game in the Kaizo Chojin Shubibinman series, and the only one to be released in North America. They renamed it Shockman for the US release. There's also a third on the PC Engine CD and a fourth on Super Famicom. This game plays like a co-op Mega Man. You have your standard blaster, but unlike Mega Man, you can actually shoot up. You can also charge your blaster for a more powerful attack, and when playing 2-player, while charging your blast, your partner can also charge their blast and shoot you to create an even more powerful attack. However, if you charge up and shoot your partner when they are not ready, it'll send them into a bouncing fireball, and this gets really annoying really fast.
There are side-scrolling shoot-'em-up levels throughout the game that are pretty solid and a nice change of pace. This might be a weird critique, but I really don't like the jump animation. They just look the same as when they're standing. It bothers me. Why couldn't they put their arms up and open their mouth like Mega Man does? There's even a story in the game. It's some pretty dramatic 90s anime shit. It honestly doesn't add anything to the game, but there are some funny lines. Shockman is pretty brutally hard right off the bat, at least for us. We may or may not have used some performance-enhancing codes to be able to complete the game. Even still, it was very enjoyable to play through this one. If you're like me and always wanted a co-op Mega Man game, this was definitely the closest thing back in the day. Number 1. Kadash.
Kadash is a 2D hack-and-slash platformer with some RPG elements. I think it could be considered an early Metroidvania, and I'll give my argument for that later. The original arcade version supported 4 players through this special double arcade cabinet that is basically 2 cabinets merged together. I've never seen this in person, but I would love to give it a try. The TurboGrafx version is only 2 players. There are 4 different classes in this game: Ninja, Priest, Mage, and Fighter. I always prefer the Priest and Ninja for their ranged attacks, but the Fighter and Mage can be useful once upgraded.
This is another game that is incredibly difficult from the start. If you're having trouble right off the bat, enter Toru, T-O-R-U, as your name after selecting your character. This will start you at level 20 and past the first boss. Maybe that's too easy for some of you elite gamers, but I felt that it made things a lot more balanced. Another tip, if you die, and you will, wait for the title screen to reappear. Then hold 1, 2, and down, then press run. You can now continue from the beginning of the level you died on. You can do this up to 3 times.
Let's talk about why I think this is a Metroidvania. Obviously, there's the leveling up as well as improving your weapons. That's standard RPG stuff. But the main argument for it being a Metroidvania is the exploration and upgrades you need to reach new areas. It's fairly linear in comparison to something like Symphony of the Night, but there are different paths you need to explore, and the correct one isn't immediately obvious. But you will often find a spot that you can't access, then need to search elsewhere until you find the item you need to move forward. It might just have limited Metroidvania characteristics, but I think it still counts.
Overall, Kadash probably has the deepest gameplay on the list. If you can get past the early difficulty of the game, I think there's a lot of fun to be had with a partner. That's all of the co-op TurboGrafx-16 games. Let us know if there are any we missed. What other co-op games should we cover? Is there a console you'd like to see us rank all of the co-op games for? Let us know in the comments.
But again, please don't bring up PC Engine and CD games. Do you understand? Thanks for watching.
Smash that motherfucking like button, you little chode. Bebop, stop, pop, sweat, shotgun, rock, bar, up, flop, chop, slop. Co-op.